It was very productive. Okay, everyone's here. The gang's all here. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Challenge Prep for hosting us, and particularly thank CEO and founder, Reverend Dr. Les Mullings, for his great work. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. I want to thank him and everyone here at Challenge Prep for hosting the Sandy Recovery and Opportunity Resource Fair. This is a site in the community. This school is a site that matters to people for a lot of reasons. Well beyond education, it's also a crucial community hub. And after Sandy, this is one of the places people came and got help. In fact, there was a Thanksgiving meal put together here, emphasizing not only the ability to feed people and help people in need, but the fact that the community was sticking together no matter what Mother Nature threw at the Rockaways. And so this is a place that affirms the strength of the Rockaways and its people. I have a lot of people I want to thank who are here with us today. First, from my own administration, folks who are working very hard to help the ongoing recovery and strengthening of the Rockaways, including Bill Goldstein, my senior advisor for recovery, resiliency, and infrastructure, Dan Zerilli, the director of our Office of Recovery and Resiliency, Amy Peterson, who is the head of our Build It Back program, and you'll be hearing from her in a moment. Actually, I started naming people you're going to hear from. I broke my own protocol. I'll introduce you again later. But I'm glad you got your round of applause. You're doing something right. Our colleagues in elective office. Now I'm going to get it right. I'm going to introduce some of the folks I'm here to want to acknowledge, and then you're going to hear from others who will speak in a moment. But I want to acknowledge a dear friend and someone I've served with in various capacities for a long, long time. And in fact, in the days after Sandy, we spent a lot of time on the streets of the Rockaways trying to find every way we could to help people in need. None other than our Senator James Sanders, Jr. Thank you for all you do. And want to thank someone who has really been a powerful voice for people in all the areas affected by Sandy, pushing the city and all levels of government to do more. And he is the chair of the Committee on Recovery and Resiliency in the City Council, Councilmember Mark Traeger. Thank you for your great work. And again, I will have the pleasure of introducing a few of our other special guests to speak in just a moment. Look, we are approaching the 2-year anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. We'll be having a lot to say in the coming days about our plans to continue to address the aftermath of what was the greatest natural disaster in the history of New York City, and that should never be forgotten. In all our recorded history, Sandy was the worst that we experienced from nature. We have come a long way. We've got, to say the least, a long way to go to try and help people in need and to build back communities stronger. A lot of people were hit very hard by the storm in communities that were already hurting. The Rockaways is clearly an example. The storm only made clearer some inequalities that had been existent for years and decades and had to be addressed. We are trying in every way to take the opportunity to rebuild as also an opportunity to achieve greater fairness. And we can't allow the pattern of the past to dominate the future. A lot of families are still struggling. We can do more, and we will do more to get them back on their feet and give them real opportunity for the future. Even though it is a bit of a trite idea, it's still true. Every crisis opens the door for a new beginning and a different way of doing things. We intend to find and to achieve that different way in this crisis. We're announcing 2 initiatives today focused on jobs. Nothing is more fundamental to the needs of the people of this community than getting and keeping good jobs. So 2 key initiatives today. Build It Back local hiring initiative. This means that for residents of Sandy-impacted neighborhoods, they will have priority for recovery and rebuilding jobs. And those jobs will also be within commuting distance of their homes. So it becomes a real opportunity for folks from neighborhoods that are affected. Second, the Rockaways Economic Advancement Initiative. This will be an investment of over $1 million to expand Workforce One services and focus them on the Rockaways. This is a combined effort with support from the Center for Economic Opportunity, the New York City Housing Authority, and City, as in Citigroup, City Community Development. This creates a pipeline for jobs, but it is not the traditional approach to job training, which in many ways was kind of superficial. This is a much more essential approach that works with residents in need of a job to figure out anything and everything that will help them achieve a job and keep a job for the long term. So there's a full range of counseling and training efforts and efforts to create all the supports people need to have gainful long-term employment. You're going to hear from someone who really epitomizes why this Workforce One approach can change people's lives. Jeremy Trotman, I'll bring him up a few minutes later from now, but I want to just give you a sense of him right now. He's a single father with a 6-year-old son, Jeremy Jr., standing here. He's a very handsome young man. Jeremy Sr. is an Army National Guard veteran. He lives in NYCHA's Ocean Bay apartments here in the Rockaways. After serving his country, he worked very hard to get a skill for the long term. He worked and became a certified plumber, but he had trouble finding jobs that were consistent and near his home. And he wanted to make sure he would be there for this young man, that he would be, in addition to a good breadwinner, he would be a good father. Well, the Workforce One Center was there to help him, finding a way to get him the kind of work he needed, good-paying work close to home. And now Jeremy is helping families that were afflicted by Sandy to get back on their feet, helping them to rebuild their homes. And this is a real success story when someone from a community afflicted helps other people who are afflicted and has a good-paying job in the bargain. That's what this is all about. We commend Jeremy, and we look forward to hearing from him in a moment. We know this has been a very painful 2 years. We know we have a lot to do. We know we cannot lose this opportunity to do things better, and that it has consequences for thousands and thousands of New Yorkers. And that's why we are so serious about making sure that we look back on this time and realized we took this opportunity to do things better. A few words in Spanish. Hoy damos un paso más para expandir oportunidades para todos los neoyorquinos. Estamos lanzando 2 nuevos programas para capacitar, preparar y conectar a los residentes de los Rockaways con empleos de calidad. With that, I will now introduce Amy Peterson at the time I'm supposed to, and say that she has done extraordinary work as the director of our Housing Recovery Office. The reason she got that round of applause is that people know she is the real thing, and she has been out in neighborhoods all over the city, listening to residents and then showing them the government could actually get it right and do something for them, and people appreciate that deeply. Honored to introduce Amy Peterson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. In the words of the mayor, the government getting it right. Since I started in this job, everyone has been talking about how we can use the Sandy recovery money to really help the residents and get jobs. And this is a first step in that direction. And I'm really happy and honored to be in an administration with a mayor who cares deeply about this and wants to take all the steps we can to really make this happen. And I'm looking forward to working with all of our partners, Alliance for a Just Rebuilding and Faith in New York. Today is the first day when we are connecting residents of Sandy-impacted areas with Sandy recovery jobs through Workforce One. But there's a lot of partners here today that have opportunities with unions, apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, community-based organizations, Sandy resources, information about the Department of Sanitation jobs that are coming up and bioswale jobs that are coming up. There's really a lot to talk about here, and it's the first step to making sure that people who were impacted by Hurricane Sandy have opportunities in the rebuilding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to bring up our Commissioner of Small Business Services, and there's a lot of things to like about Maria Torres Springer. One of the things I liked was when I interviewed with her and I said we need to find a way to train people for jobs and really make it stick. She was adamant about not being interested in the old approach to job training, but wanting something that was really going to be about a job that you got and you kept and that you could build upon. I could hear her passion for that mission. She happens to be a child of immigrants who worked very hard to make it in America. I think she remembers that experience and brings it to the work she does. Our Small Business Services Commissioner, Maria Torres Springer.
Thank you, Mayor. We at SBS are thrilled to be part of tonight's event, an event designed to ensure that local communities continue to participate in the recovery efforts while at the same time access available jobs. I'd like to thank Amy Peterson and the HRO team for their collaboration on the Build It Back local hiring initiative, the employers and all the not-for-profits here tonight, and of course Jackie Mallon and the SBS Workforce One team who've worked tirelessly on this initiative. At today's fair, local job seekers will gain access to employment opportunities, referrals to quality training programs, and career development workshops on resume writing and interviewing. But as the Mayor mentioned, tonight's event is part of a larger commitment we are making to expand workforce development efforts in the Rockaways. Through the generous support of the Center for Economic Opportunity and City Community Development, we are so pleased to launch the Rockaways Economic Advancement Initiative. This initiative, which will be a model across the city, will allow us to deepen the city's workforce development efforts in the area and provide job seekers with more robust, more comprehensive job assistance. We hope it'll be, this place-based model will benefit not just the residents of the Rockaways, but will serve as a model for the way we do this work moving forward, not just rapidly connecting people to jobs, but understanding what their unique challenges are, addressing those challenges, and connecting them to full-time, long-term, gainful employment. So thanks to everyone. We look forward to working with everyone in this room here tonight and in the weeks and months to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And I mentioned before Jeremy Trotman, and I think he's a great example of the strength of this community. I want to thank him on behalf of all of us for having served his country and now doing so much to serve people who need help getting back on their feet. And I want you to hear his story as an example of what this Workforce One approach can achieve. Jeremy Trotman.
Hello. I'm Jeremy Trotman. Brief little story. Veteran, had to retire, forced retirement because of a family tragedy. Lost my fiance. Sandy hit. We ended up being homeless for a little while. Ocean Bay graciously gave us an apartment and couldn't find any work. Fully qualified, couldn't find no work whatsoever. Then I ran into Workforce One and pointed me in the right direction. Ever since then, I've been working as a plumber, repairing all the homes that was affected from Sandy, and it's been great. Me and my son are doing wonderful. I think this program is beautiful. Thank you.
Go for it. That was like the Gettysburg Address. That was really brief and to the point and memorable. Well done, sir. Finally, I want to introduce two of our elected officials, and I want to just tell you from personal experience, they both very forcefully and energetically advocate on behalf of the Rockaways on Sandy and a lot of other fronts, and I think people should be very appreciative that these folks work hard on their behalf. First, our Borough President of Queens, Melinda Katz.
We want to first congratulate Jeremy. And JC, your dad just spoke in front of the mayor and everyone. Pretty cool, right? He was hiding. I want to thank Mayor de Blasio and, of course, Senator Sanders and Councilman Richards and Amy Peterson and Bill Goldstein from Build It Back have been in my office every single month working with community after community that's been impacted. And Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for them and the work that they have done. And I'd also like to note that, the mayor talked about the fact that Sandy was 2 years ago. He's been the mayor for 10 months. I think it's important to put that in perspective. Speaker after speaker has spoken about the fact that we are connecting impacted folks with folks that are giving opportunities. This is an administration who wanted to make sure that we got it right, that we were going to train individuals, find them jobs, make sure that they can actually stay in the community if that's what the choice was, make sure that those jobs would last more than just a stopgap, make sure that folks were still working in years to come. And he's put this together, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for coming out here, delivering that message, and making sure that we understood that work is important to this administration and putting people to work is important. So I am so grateful that this investment has been made in the Sandy impacted areas. It is desperately needed. It will go a long way in making sure that folks can be parents and work at the same time, and it will keep folks working, and it's a great investment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Finally, another man that I spent time with in those days after Sandy out here, and he worked hard to try and help people back on their feet, and he's continuing that work to really great effect in the City Council. City Council member Donovan Richards.
Well, isn't it a great day here in the Rockaways today? Whenever we can get a mayor in Far Rockaway, it speaks volumes, and I'm just so appreciative to Mayor de Blasio, Amy Peterson, Dan Zarelli, Bill Goldstein, and Maria Scott Springer, the commissioner of SBS. I created a new name. Torres Springer. Okay, got it.
Scott Springer's the controller.
Got it. We thank him also. But it is truly an honor to be here. I think I've spent more time out in the Rockaways with commissioners from your administration than I've seen in probably the past 10 years. And I have to say that your administration has been phenomenal, and not only have come out here and given words, but have delivered on those words in this particular community. So we're very grateful to you. I think when we speak of recovery, and it's something that we've been pushing very hard working with this administration, is that we understand that even as we rebuild our communities, that we have an opportunity here to rebuild people's lives. And there are a lot of stories out here and people similar to Jeremy and JC in this particular community who, or if afforded the opportunity to work, will put shovels to ground. They want to do better for their lives. They want to be able to feed their children. And today is certainly a great step in that direction. I'm just so grateful and overwhelmed to be here and to see this come to fruition for our particular community. We have a lot more work to do, but I'm pretty confident that with this administration that we will only move forward and move upward. So God bless you. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio.
Before we take questions about this announcement, I just want to also welcome and acknowledge Assemblymember Michelle Titus. Thank you so much for joining us today. With that, questions from the media.
I'm Katie from DNA Info. Two of the things you talk about is economic prosperity in Rockaway, as well as jobs, and one of the most vital parts of that is transportation. And out here, especially after the hurricane, the Rockaway ferry was a big deal to so much of the community here. But after Halloween, it's actually going away. Is there a reason why it couldn't be funded, or you could have possibly found a way to fund transportation to connect the whole peninsula, especially the east end, to the ferry to keep it alive and going?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say a lot of the elected officials have spoken very forcefully on this issue. And I've tried to give them my understanding of the issue and where I think we need to go, and that has not stopped them from advocating very, very aggressively for what they believe is right, so I credit them for that. Look, the notion of the ferry was to address what was an absence of mass transit with the subway lines that were knocked out by Sandy. Thank God, those lines are up and running again. That crisis was resolved, and that is the core reason why the ferry was there. It was a stopgap. It was a temporary measure. On the question of where we go from here, we're doing some things in the short term to address Sandy and some other things that are about addressing right now problems. But there is a bigger mission ahead. Talked to the borough president about this at length, a lot of the other leaders here. We need a holistic development plan for the Rockaways. We need to undo a lot of what was done wrong in the past in the sense of the economic reality of the Rockaways being ignored. A lot of what we intend to do for the whole city will, I think, particularly help the Rockaways. What we're doing with pre-K, what we're doing with after school, what we're doing with affordable housing plan, a lot of those pieces will have a very strong impact on Rockaways. But beyond that, we have to have a job creation plan, and then the transportation has to be connected to it. I think we have a lot of options around ferry service, not only in the Rockaways, but in other parts of the city that are important to our economic future because we're going to be growing as a city. We have a projection of another 500,000 people being added to the city over the next few decades. But that has to be part of a coherent plan. If we're going to fund something, we're not funding it temporarily. We would be funding it permanently. That would be our vision, and we do not have that plan yet. So I understand those who would like to see the temporary service continue. I respect them. But what I've said to everyone involved is I want us to come back with a long-term vision for the economic growth of the Rockaways and the transportation to go with it. And that's where we're going to put our resources. On this topic of the announcement, yes?
Just following up on your answer to that. When you were here about a year ago, and consistent with what you said before, you spoke about righting greater wrongs, not just the wrongs of Sandy. How does that shape what you just alluded to but didn't really describe in terms of the future plan for Rockaway that your administration is going to have? How does that reflect the stated goal of yours of righting greater wrongs?
Well, I think the fact is, if we say, for example, here and now, that people who are negatively affected by Sandy need not only the services they deserve, like the help getting their home fixed, but also need economic opportunity, jobs. That's a departure from the way things were done in the past to begin with. Let's face it, in a lot of the previous dynamics, when there was some kind of crisis or emergency, the jobs were given in some other fashion, but not necessarily to the people who were affected. We've made a priority to get jobs to people who were affected and to neighborhoods that were affected. Beyond that, again, when you look at the pieces we're putting in place, and the affordable housing plan is a great example, this is a neighborhood where we think there will be thousands more affordable units and thousands more market units because of the plan we're putting in place, and that will have a very big impact on the families of the Rockaways. This is a neighborhood that deserves a lot more in infrastructure investment, and we intend to put forward a plan to put additional infrastructure investments that should have been done a long time ago that really will undergird a more vibrant economy here. So I think the simplest way of saying it is we believe that this moment, in the result of the crisis, it has put a real fine point on what was missing in the past. I think, by the way, it's done the same for Coney Island. It's done the same for Red Hook. You know, this is not the only neighborhood. This one is maybe the most sharp example. But it allows us now to say, with all the other pieces we're going to put on the field, how do we maximize in terms of people's economic reality? How do we maximize? How do we create more jobs, but also make sure that people here get the jobs? How do we make sure that there's also more opportunity for affordable housing? How do we make sure there's more opportunity for education? And knit those pieces together. That's why I say we want to have a truly coherent plan for the Rockaways, and then the funding will connect to that plan. We don't want to just throw some spare pieces or stray pieces at the equation. We think this deserves its own plan.
Is there a timeline yet, both for that broad plan as well as the infrastructure improvements that you
Yeah, so I would say you're going to hear some more announcements in the coming months related to the Rockaways that are specific, and then thereafter you're going to see a much bigger plan. So I don't want to give you a date yet. You will hear some other announcements in the meantime. But working with all the stakeholders, working with the elected officials here, you know, my charge to all of us is let's get a common vision for economic development. I think that's something you'll see next year. Please.
Miriam from the Rockaway Way.
Yes.
I hate to beat a dead horse. When Anthony Weiner was in the House, he gave what ferry?
He did. I couldn't hear you. He did what?
He gave a lot of money for the Rockaway ferry. Mr. Adabo, when he was in the council, also gave money. What happened to all that money? And can we actually say now that the people who might be outside protesting that the ferry will be discontinued at the end of the year?
We've made that clear that the plan, you know, we did several extensions to get it to October because that's when we finally knew the subway lines would be 100% up and running, and they are, thank God. Any investments made in the past, I can't give you the chapter and verse, but I can say this much. Any investment that was made or any investment where we can still get the resources, we want to, because as I said, I think what we need here is an actual long-term plan for both the economy and the transportation needs of the Rockaways. I don't make it my habit to say, I'm going to do something temporary and just call it a day. I want to work from a bigger plan. And this community deserves a bigger plan. But once you have something that you can support, meaning we've come up with something we actually believe is sustainable year in, year out, I think the transportation needs are obviously a crucial piece of the equation. So I would say to people, one, from day one I've said this was a temporary service, and that moment has come where it's time to discontinue this service because the subways are back. But two, We intend to make a lot more investment in the Rockaways on a lot of fronts. And I would like to see the question of ferry service treated more generally. I think this is an area in the city that we're underplaying our hand, not just in the Rockaways, not just in Queens, the whole city. I think there's much more opportunity around ferry service. But we have to figure out how to finance it in a way that's really sustainable for the long term, and that's what we're going to be working on. Please.
That was given by Mr. Adabo and Mr. Weiner. It has actually been reported that it was never used. It was just put to the side. Can you have the administration?
I just don't know the chapter and verse. If someone else does, they're more than welcome to explain, but I don't know the chapter and verse on this. Melinda, do you want to? It's capital money. Right. It's not. It wasn't expensive. Right. It's not. It would not pay for the operation of the ferry. But again, anything that either was invested on the capital side or still can be captured, I think there's a very good likelihood that that money will be needed in the future when we have a coherent plan. Sorry, media questions? Are you media? Yes. Okay.
Is there any city effort to track down the scammers, the contractors who scam Sandy victims, and then also how satisfied are you with the pace of Build It Back? Because with the DOR report, there's been a lot of concern that your administration took kind of a premature victory lap with it.
Well, I appreciate the question. I would disagree with that characterization, but I appreciate the question. I'm going to start on the second part, which is the pace, and then Amy or others, if you want to talk about the question of how we're dealing with people who might commit fraud. There's no victory lap because the job is not done. All we are proud of is we said we would set a goal, and we met that first goal, 500 construction starts and 500 reimbursements by Labor Day. That happened and was surpassed. We are shortly going to be talking about a new set of goals. When we say we're going to hit those goals, and I hope people recognize that whether you're talking about construction starts and reimbursements, whether you're talking about pre-K seats, whether you're talking about after-school seats, if we say we're going to hit a goal, we're going to hit the goal. We don't put out the goal. We don't believe we can't hit it. And we also, once we put out the goal, move heaven and earth to get there. So there's no victory lap. There's simply acknowledgement that we took something that was at zero, literally, and turned it into something that was beginning to work. But it has to work a lot better. We say it has to work a lot better. I think the DOI report pointed out the mistakes of the past before we got here, and it was a cautionary tale about things that we need to learn from and continue to do better. So we're not going to be satisfied bluntly until everybody who has an application in is served in one way or another. Amy?
Related to contractors that were fraudulent and took advantage of Sandy victims outside of the Build It Back program, people should refer those to the Department of Consumer Affairs, but they can also reach out to the Build It Back line, especially if people have registered for Build It Back. We can hopefully help them to get the work done.
I think the question is, how do we feel we're doing at dealing with fraud or stopping fraud?
We're stopping fraud on Build It Back, yes. Yeah, we're partnering with DOI. You know, part of the reason they issued that report is they have a monitorship, they have a hotline, and they've been watching for contractor fraud, and we take it very seriously.
The question you mentioned, the Minister of Affordable Housing. Clearly, affordable housing is such a big issue in the city, but realistically, knowing how bad Rockaway was hit after Hurricane Sandy and knowing that a Sandy could happen again, does the city have plans to change? If there's thousands of more people living on this peninsula, is there an updated plan of evacuating homes and getting people out? Because it doesn't seem that prudent pushing thousands of more people potentially in a flood zone that's a barrier island.
Well, I think that's a good question, how to do it best, and I'll start, and I'm going to look to Bill and Dan if you want to add anything to this point. Look, I think it's a smart question, but I want to say that the premise here of everything we're doing in New York City, which is a coastal city if ever there was one, and a lot of places in the floodplain still can be developed, is we're going to use a different and better building code. You'll see more elevation. You'll see, of course, mechanicals and generators put higher up. There's all sorts of things that we can do a lot smarter and better in a lot of different parts of the city, and that is all being built into our future approach to planning. But I think when you think about the affordable housing plan, 200,000 units over 10 years, we're going to go where we have the opportunities to make that happen and as quickly as possible. We're clearly going to be sensitive to the climate dynamics. But I think we can safely say, if we were starting over again in the Rockaways and things were built from scratch from day one, you would have had a lot more homes that could have withstood what happened on Sandy. A lot of it had to do with an older way of doing things that is not what we do anymore. So I feel pretty confident and our ability to choose the right locations and build properly. I feel confident in terms of what we're doing as a city with a lot of federal support in terms of restoring beaches and dunes and wetlands and all the things that provide natural protective barriers. I think all those pieces are going to add up, and I think we've all thought a lot about how to do better evacuation in the future. God forbid we need it. I don't think you're ever going to see the same dynamics again in this city. I think when we say evacuate, and I pray I never have to have a moment in the next years where I have to say those words to New Yorkers, but when we say evacuate, I don't think anyone's going to doubt it this time. And I think we're going to put a huge apparatus in place of public safety personnel to make it work. So you asked a sort of multi-part question. I think the core of it is we have, all of us, not just in New York City, but around the country, have learned a lot from these disasters. We'll build, I think, better and smarter. We've learned a lot about how to create those protective barriers, and we've learned a lot about how to evacuate when, God forbid, those moments come. We've learned a lot about how to do that better. Anyone want to add? Bill?
Not much to add. I think the mayor really hit all the points. I would also add that our building code has been upgraded so that any new homes that are built or major rehabilitation that takes place now have to be built to totally different standards. And I think, all the things the mayor mentioned, coupled with a number of the resiliency projects that we're working with the federal government on, over time will make this a much different environment than it was when Sandy hit. Thanks.
All right. I want last question, then we're going to open the doors so people can come and experience this.
Obviously, I just got here, so I apologize if this question
you missed an exciting dialogue.
The memo that was released by the Wave talking about the $480 million anticipated from FEMA, it was communicated to you that it would perhaps be a political liability for that number to become known. A, do you think it's a political liability? And B, will that money be spent at Rockaway? If it is $480 million, will that money be spent?
So, point one, it was not communicated to me. In other words, the stories came out about someone putting it in a memo. I never saw the memo before I saw the stories. So, someone may have been attempting to communicate, but it never got to me. Of course, it's not a political liability to have resources, and of course, we should be held accountable for the resources. So, the truth is, and I will guarantee you a more detailed answer because I don't even know the details of that funding stream and its specific goals, but, we've tried to be pretty clear about what we're targeting to each area and why, but never do I believe anything is a liability if it comes with resources attached. I think that all of the Sandy funding that we've announced, wave after wave, we've said what we intend to do with it. People should hold us accountable. When we said back in the late spring we were going to do 500 construction starts and 500 reimbursements, we knew that we were on the hook. And we didn't have the perfect game plan of how to get there. We had to build it as we went along. So I never think it's bad to have a public goal. We've done it in a lot of areas, as you've seen, in education, affordable housing, et cetera. I never think it's bad to have resources. I'm thrilled when we have resources. What we owe you is a clear articulation of what we intend to do with it, whether it's for the Rockaways or anywhere else, and we can certainly get back to you with that. Thank you. We're now going to open the doors so people can benefit from this extraordinary fair and get job opportunities.